The lights dropped at Wakas' stage, and Australia stopped breathing. A roar erupted as Filipino flags surged into the air, voices colliding into one deafening wave. Then the first notes of Simula at Wakas cut through the darkness, and something shifted. This wasn't just a concert. This was history being written in real time. Thousands stood frozen, emotional, witnessing SB19 not as visitors, not as a novelty, but as global artists claiming their space on foreign ground. In that moment, Australia didn't just host SB19, it felt them. A beginning, an arrival, a breakthrough no one could ignore. If this moment gave you chills, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be seen, heard, and remembered. Australia is not an easy place to conquer, especially for Asian artists breaking beyond their home base. It is geographically distant, culturally insulated, and historically difficult for non-Western acts to penetrate without heavy industry backing. Unlike the United States, where large Filipino communities naturally create built-in support systems, Australia offers no such guarantees. The Filipino population is smaller, spread out, and often underserved by major touring circuits. Every seat filled, every voice raised, had to be earned. That's what made this night different. SB19 didn't rely on hype, radio rotation, or mainstream validation. They relied on connection. The energy inside Wakas' stage told a story numbers never could. Fans screaming lyrics word for word, waving flags like declarations, reacting emotionally to every pause and every breath. This wasn't passive attendance. It was full-body engagement. More importantly, the show proved something crucial. SB19's reach is no longer confined to familiar territory. Their music traveled across oceans, languages, and cultural borders, and still landed with impact. Australia didn't just show up out of curiosity. It responded with loyalty and intensity. In an industry obsessed with charts and ticket counts, this night offered a different metric of success. SB19 didn't just sell a show. They built trust. They sparked emotion. They confirmed that their global expansion isn't theoretical. It's already happening. Before we go any further, like this video, share it everywhere, and subscribe. Because history only matters if people see it. When the opening notes of Simula at Wakas echoed through Wakas' stage, the atmosphere changed instantly. The noise softened. Phones lowered. Voices caught in throats. This wasn't just another song in the set list. It was the emotional spine of the entire night. Simula at Wakas carries weight because it mirrors SB19's own journey. It speaks of beginnings born from endings, of perseverance through uncertainty, of standing at the edge of something unknown and choosing to move forward anyway. On an Australian stage, thousands of miles from home, those words hit harder than ever. As the members sang, the crowd responded in waves. Some stood in stunned silence, others wiped tears openly. When the chorus arrived, voices joined in, not perfectly, not loudly, but sincerely. It felt communal, almost sacred, a shared acknowledgement of how far SB19 had come and how much further they were willing to go. This performance wasn't about vocal power or choreography. It was about vulnerability. You could see it in the pauses, in the way the members looked out into the crowd as if grounding themselves in the moment. Simula at Wakas became more than a song. It became a reflection. And for many in the room, it was the moment they would carry home with them, long after the lights came back on. SB19's presence on an Australian stage did not come from overnight success or viral luck. It was built through years of discipline, sacrifice, and uncertainty. Long before international crowds sang their lyrics back to them, the group endured intense training with little guarantee of recognition. They faced skepticism, from an industry unsure of P-pop's global viability, and from audiences conditioned to look elsewhere for mainstream excellence. Their early years were marked by self-belief when external validation was scarce. They wrote their own music, refined their sound, and insisted on creative control even when it slowed their rise. Each release carried risk. Each performance was a test. Instead of chasing trends, SB19 focused on building something sustainable, music rooted in identity, struggle, and ambition. If you believe this was more than a concert, like, share, and subscribe, and help carry this moment beyond Australia. Standing on an Australian stage, that long road became visible. This moment wasn't a destination, it was a checkpoint, proof that every setback, every overlooked milestone, had purpose. They didn't arrive as a novelty act or cultural experiment. They arrived as artists with a story already written into their work. What made the night powerful was the quiet understanding that this was part of something bigger. SB19 wasn't just expanding territory, they were building a global presence piece by piece. Australia represented validation, not from an industry gatekeeper, but from people who chose to listen. And that made it earned in the purest sense. From the moment doors opened, it was clear the crowd would be as unforgettable as the performance. Atin didn't just attend the show, they transformed the space. Filipino flags waved proudly, banners rose with handwritten messages, and coordinated chants filled the venue before SB19 even stepped on stage. For one night, Wakas stage felt less like a foreign venue and more like home. The fans carried the emotional weight of the concert. Every lyric was echoed back with intention. Every pause was met with cheers that felt protective, almost familial. When emotions surfaced on stage, the audience responded instinctively, applause softening into reassurance, voices rising when strength was needed. This wasn't casual fandom. It was collective presence. What stood out most was the organization. Chants landed perfectly. Light sticks moved in unison. Reactions were shared, not scattered. This showed something powerful. SB19's fan base doesn't rely on proximity. It travels, prepares, and shows up fully, regardless of geography. In Australia, Atin proved that support isn't defined by numbers alone, but by depth. The crowd didn't just watch SB19 perform, they amplified them, emotionally and spiritually. Together, they turned a distant stage into a place of belonging, proving that wherever SB19 goes, their community follows and grows. What made the night unforgettable wasn't flawless execution. It was the moments when perfection cracked and something real poured through. Each member had instances that felt deeply personal, almost unguarded. Vocals trembled slightly under emotion, not weakness. Pauses lingered longer than planned, as if the weight of the crowd needed to be fully absorbed before moving on. Those seconds said more than any choreography ever could. There were moments of stillness where eye contact replaced movement, members scanning the crowd, locking eyes with fans, visibly grounding themselves in the reality of where they were. Smiles appeared slowly, not rehearsed, but earned. In some moments, emotion crept up unexpectedly, reflected in deep breaths, softened expressions, or eyes that glistened under the stage lights. These weren't mistakes. They were human responses to a milestone finally being felt in real time. Instead of pushing through mechanically, SB19 allowed themselves to exist in the moment. That choice changed the atmosphere. The audience responded instantly, cheers rising, voices steadying the room, offering emotional support back to the stage. It became a shared exchange rather than a one-sided performance. These individual moments reminded everyone why SB19 connects so deeply. They don't hide behind polish. They let their journey show, uncertainty, pride, gratitude, and exhaustion all woven together. In Australia, those raw flashes of authenticity became the most powerful highlights of the night, imprinting themselves on memory far more deeply than any perfect note ever could. This concert was more than a personal victory for SB19. It marked a turning point for P-pop itself. For years, Filipino artists have been boxed into narrow expectations, often overlooked by global industries that favor familiar markets and established narratives. Australia, witnessing SB19 headline with confidence, originality, and full creative control, quietly dismantled those assumptions. On that stage, P-pop wasn't presented as an imitation or regional curiosity. It stood on its own terms: distinct sound, authentic storytelling, and unapologetic identity. SB19 didn't dilute who they were to fit a global mold. Instead, they invited the audience into their world, and the response proved that authenticity travels farther than conformity ever could. This moment challenged industry gatekeeping that often decides which voices are exportable. SB19 showed that Filipino artists don't need permission to take up space internationally. They can lead, headline, and command attention without compromise. That visibility matters, not just for one group, but for future artists watching from home, realizing the ceiling isn't as fixed as they were told. Australia became a proving ground, not because of charts or headlines, but because the crowd responded with respect and emotional investment. That reaction sent a clear message: P-pop belongs on global stages. And with this performance, SB19 didn't just open a door, they pushed it wider, leaving space for others to follow. When the lights finally rose at Wakas stage, the concert technically ended. But emotionally, it was only beginning. Outside the venue and across time zones, the impact of the night rippled outward almost instantly. Social media filled with trembling hands, tear-streaked faces, and words that struggled to keep up with feeling. Fans didn't just post clips, they shared confessions, gratitude, overwhelm, a sense of having witnessed something rare and personal. Short videos of Simula at Wakas spread rapidly, capturing the quiet moments as much as the loud ones, the pauses, the shared silence, the way the crowd seemed to breathe together. Comments poured in from those who couldn't attend, expressing regret, pride, and disbelief that such a moment happened so far from home. Even casual viewers felt the weight through their screens. What stood out most was how many fans described the concert as grounding. Some wrote about feeling seen. Others talked about closure, inspiration, or renewed strength. This wasn't just entertainment, it was emotional resonance, a shared experience that lingered long after the music stopped. For many, sleep didn't come easily that night. The songs replayed, the images stayed vivid, the emotions refused to settle. That's how you know a performance mattered. It didn't fade into memory. It embedded itself. SB19 didn't just leave Australia with applause. They left with hearts still processing what they had just felt. The Australian show was more than a successful tour stop. It was proof of possibility. It demonstrated that SB19's connection doesn't weaken with distance. It intensifies. Performing with that level of emotional exchange so far from home sent a clear message. Their music transcends geography. This moment opens doors. Larger venues become realistic. New markets feel less speculative and more inevitable. Confidence grows. Not the loud kind, but the quiet certainty that comes from knowing your work resonates wherever it's heard. Australia didn't just respond politely. It responded deeply. That distinction matters. For SB19, this night reinforced something fundamental. They don't need to dilute their identity to expand globally. Their authenticity, their storytelling, their vulnerability, their cultural grounding is precisely what travels. The Australian crowd proved that audiences are ready to meet them where they are, rather than asking them to become something else. Industry conversations often revolve around crossover potential. This show reframed that idea entirely. SB19 didn't cross over by changing lanes. They brought their lane with them, and people followed. As they look ahead to future tours, collaborations, and milestones, Australia stands as a marker. A reminder that the world is listening, not because SB19 asked for permission, but because they earned attention. The path forward is no longer hypothetical. It's already unfolding. The phrase Simula at Wakas lingered long after the final note faded. On paper, it speaks of beginnings and endings. But in Australia, it took on a deeper meaning. What unfolded at Wakas stage was not a conclusion. It was confirmation. Confirmation that SB19 belongs on global stages. Confirmation that their story, born in the Philippines, now resonates far beyond its borders. That night did not close a chapter. It underlined one. SB19 didn't arrive seeking permission or validation. They arrived already formed, already tested, already carrying the weight of every sacrifice behind them. Australia didn't witness a group trying to break internationally. It witnessed artists who had already done the work and were now stepping confidently into the next phase of their journey. The symbolism was impossible to miss. A song about endurance performed thousands of miles from home, embraced by a crowd that understood its message without explanation. That is impact. That is legacy in motion. SB19 didn't just perform songs. They shared a lived narrative, and the audience received it as their own. History isn't always loud. Sometimes it happens in shared silence, in held breaths, in moments that feel heavier than applause. That's what Australia gave SB19, and what SB19 returned in full. Simula at Wakas was never meant to signal an ending. It marked a threshold, and as SB19 moves forward, this night will stand as proof that the beginning of their global legacy has already begun, and it's only gaining strength.